Welcome, folks. So figured just give it another minute or so as people continue to come on in and we can kick off with a little bit of an introduction time. But welcome, folks. Yeah, so TRCN, so welcome to the Community of Practice skill session. As we all probably know, this is a companion to the educational COP that's going on Tuesday. So great to see everyone here. Thanks for joining us. Excellent. So yeah, we'll go ahead and kick it off shortly. Great. Alrighty. Yes, so today we'll be discussing asset mapping by popular demand. We had sent out a little bit of a Google form where people can select skills that they were interested in doing a deeper dive in this community with, and asset mapping certainly rose to the top in terms of topic folks were interested in. So it's great to see everybody on today. 9:02, yeah, I think we can kick it off with some introductions. I'm seeing about 10 folks on the call, so I imagine we can do feel free to come off mute and maybe introduce yourself, your organization, if you are with an organization, and your region here. I can kick it off. My name's Christian. I work with Trauma Informed Oregon here, based in Portland, Oregon, and it's great to see everybody today. Yeah. Um, Excellent. Maybe I could pass it over. I see Drew on the call. Would you like to say hi, Drew?
Hi, everybody. My name is Drew Alcozer, pronouns they, them, and I am in Southwest Washington, Portland, Oregon adjacent. And I have a emerging nonprofit called Cascadia Stack, where we deal with climate emotions, anxiety, etc. And I am working with the Portland team to build a coordinating network. Good to be here.
Thanks for being here, Drew. Yeah. I see Mary Ann. Hi there. Would you like to introduce yourself today?
Sure. Hi, my name is Marianne. I'm in mostly in Berkeley, sometimes in Marin. I'm not associated with a similar kind of an organization, Christian, to what you described or what the previous speaker described, but I do work with a climate advocacy group, and I'm part of Extinction Rebellion. And so I'm wanting to gain some information and to disseminate and perhaps put a special group together for this sort of work, because it's really essential. Since the last administration began, I actually started a mutual aid group. And so I think this will be some of the information that I'll glean from here will be useful for that as well. Thank you.
Awesome. You're in the right place, and yeah, welcome. Great to see you. Stephanie, I see you there. Would you feel free to introduce yourself if you like?
Sure, thanks. Yeah, my name is Stephanie. I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. And I saw a session on TRCN's at a mental health and climate conference that I attended a while ago, and I was really impressed and excited about the idea. I sort of have two hats. So I work at the University of Alberta on a project around climate change and mental health. And then I also am a facilitator with an organization called Refugio Retreats, which uses something called Work That Reconnects methodology to help people process climate emotions into meaning and reasons to act and to understand their values and stuff. So yeah, I'm just really interested in how to get more involved with developing a TRCN. So that's why I'm here.
Cool. Welcome aboard. Yeah, great to have you. Yeah, Reb, hi there. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah.
So, Reb McKenzie, I am in Claremont, New Hampshire, and I've been following Bob's work for quite a while, since 2016. And just a colleague and I just finished up creating the other option in step 3, which is the educational program. We've got 20 lessons that are talking about presencing and purposing skills. We just made a presentation to the New Hampshire Psychological Association, and just looking forward to hearing what we're doing today. So thank you, and so glad that everybody.
Welcome. Yeah, good to see you. I see Jennifer on the call. If you want to come off mute and introduce yourself, please feel free.
Here. Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm Jennifer Shepherd. I'm up in Coast Salish territory, actually pretty close to Stephanie. So I'm pretty curious and about connecting with others on this call and meeting some folks with like minds. A peer invited me to do this program together, and so we're going to be meeting offline to explore what may be possible actually in our own local neighborhoods. We've been curious about exploring the climate emotions that come up and how we can support one another in these well, turbulent times, right? And just starting with like what is small and doable that we can manage with all the other things going on our plates, and what can we do as with our limited resources compared to what folks with larger organizations and paid capacity can do, and how might we actually tap into all that. So pretty curious about what's possible when we start to plant these seeds and what just grows organically. So thank you.
Awesome. Welcome. I see Katie and Jeff. Feel free to introduce yourself if you like.
Hi, it's just me. Sorry, my name's Edna. I'm just a resident. I'm located in Southern California, and thank you for hosting this series. I think it's really important that people stay calm and collected, we'll say, because it's going to, I think it's going to get rough depending on how people respond. Well, it's the other side that matters.
Well, welcome. We're glad to have you here. Thanks for being here. And then Christina, I think, is feel free to introduce yourself if you like.
Hi, I'm Christina. I'm really happy to be here. I was very inspired by the initial couple educational sessions, although I wasn't able to attend the live versions. This is a tumultuous time, and we have a lot more ahead. I'm really glad that this exists and excited to see where it goes.
Well, we're excited you're here. Thanks. Excellent. Well, I appreciate everyone, feeling free to introduce themselves. That's great. Cool. Yeah. So today we'll be talking about asset mapping. Like I mentioned earlier, it was the skill that really rose to the top in terms of interests as we ask folks. But before we kick it off, I hope that changed on everyone's screen. Feel free to let me know if it's still okay, cool. Excellent. Yeah, maybe starting off with a quick resilience pause. This is one of Bob's kind of go-tos, and think it is really ties into the asset mapping process, where we can kind of lean into imagining maybe kind of either what the future has, how we can facilitate that future, and make efforts towards that end. So if it resonates with you folks, take a moment to use the skylight method to notice what we're experiencing right now in our body, our mind, and our emotions. And that's just going as far as to just take a second with ourselves and really imagining a spotlight looking down into our body, kind of being aware of what we're feeling right now. Maybe we're carrying tension, which, I mean, is understandable given the tumultuous time we're in. Maybe there's other things going on. So just take a second or two to check in with yourself. And as we're doing that, we can launch into the magic wand of resilience. So imagine that you've just found a magic wand that allows you to change 3 things in the here and now, not the past or the future, related to our thinking or behavior. What 3 things would you change about the way that you deal with stress and adversity today? That's right now. Why would it be beneficial or important for you to make those 3 changes? And continuing with that, imagine that we're always completely resilient. What would be different? Are there any changes that we would make within ourselves? And can we imagine a way to help people in our neighborhood or community make similar changes? This activity for me kind of brings up ideas of hope and what keeps us going, in the face of these challenges that we're facing as communities all over the world when it comes to our climate crisis and building resilience in that way. And I think for me, a source of hope is looking at the people who have done fantastic work before, and drawing inspiration and hope and resilience from these efforts and examples. So if anything came up for you that you'd like to share in chat, feel free. I can't see chat at the moment, but maybe Christy can engage in that way. So excellent. Alrighty, folks. Well, thanks for joining me on that kind of brief resilience pause, centering, ourselves in this work, or in the sense of being here now. All right, we've done our introductions. If anyone has come on the call since introductions, please feel free to introduce yourself in chat. Feel free to put your organization and your region in there, and it's great to have you here.
Christian,
But today,
want
yes.
to share that two folks put in the chat: increase equanimity and daily affirmations.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that's very important to have a kind of a ritual and process, regular process where we're those affirmations are fantastic. And thank you. I really appreciate people being willing to share. Excellent. So yeah, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you haven't already. It's great to have you folks on. Today we'll be talking asset mapping. So this might be a little bit of something we've done as organizations or as people before, but asset mapping is essentially a process that explores resources and potential partners, opportunities for resilience building, specifically within your region. And then this list or actual map, we'll get into that in a moment, is regularly updated and continues to expand as partnerships are created, as new resources are found and developed, and as progress is made to that end. So asset mapping can serve as a tool. The ladder of engagement was a very popular piece in the skills that people selected as well. So we'll jump into that on the next slide and kind of plug asset mapping into this process. So the ladder of engagement, as far as transformational resilience coordinating networks go, follows this kind of this process where you slowly build your engagement out, bringing folks in. And I think it's important to realize that these steps aren't always linear. I mean, we see that currently working with Drew and Christy in the Portland TRCN. And this process has looked a little different for us. And I think it's important to keep in mind that you can really adapt this process to whatever your community's specific needs are and what would be best to build engagement and bring people in. But the general flow of this ladder of engagement starts with assessing current conditions as a starting point, and we'll be jumping into that today with the asset mapping. But then asset mapping also really bolsters efforts in terms of the subsequent rungs on this ladder of engagement, if you will. So next up would be creating that mission and vision of success, and asset mapping is very much involved in that, because in order, we'll get into this in a moment, to start the asset mapping process, you have to have that mission or vision of success, some overarching goal here. Why are we cataloging and collecting these resources? Why are we building these connections across the community? Next up on the ladder of engagement, we'll be building a case for forming a TRCN. And I think given what's going on in each of our communities, I think it's now is the best time to be forming a TRCN or making efforts towards building community resilience. Building in co-founders, people to join you in your TRCN efforts, and asset mapping certainly is benefited by people coming on board and assisting with the process and sharing their expertise and experience, as well as the asset mapping can serve to help find co-founders as well. Works on both ends. And then you kicking off in a way that is engaging for folks, fun kickoff meetings, keeping in mind starting small and seek and promote small wins. Somebody on the call mentioned earlier that we're plugging in where we can and celebrating those small victories and small moments of building resilience. Setting metrics, measuring, we're keep adapting, very much in line with the asset mapping process, where we're establishing our area, measuring and collecting resources in that area, and then adapting the asset map to the changing landscape of resources and partnerships. And then finally, creating a community-led and centric culture. And I think asset mapping certainly invites community participation, invites community involvement in the TRCN efforts here. So just a little bit about the ladder of engagement. This will continue to be a theme as we do these skill sessions, and I imagine it'll pop up in the educational series as well. There's kind of where we're starting today, assessing current conditions as a starting point. But as we've said, asset mapping really helps this entire ladder of engagement process. So great starting point. Alrighty, so quick activity, asset mapping in your community. So let's take a couple of minutes to consider these points. Consider 2 to 3 assets. These can be organizations, these can be people, places, other resources in your area. Now, feel free to think outside the box here. I mean, an asset can be really anything that helps maintain health and resilience during these adversities that each of our communities are going through right now. Where are these assets located? Is it challenging for members of your community to access these resources? Are there certain groups within your community that are excluded from accessing these resources? Who in your community are benefited by these assets? So feel free to take a couple moments. If you feel, if you're interested, feel free to pop them in chat. Or, you know, we have a pretty small group here. So if you want to come off mute and share, that's encouraged. And yeah, I'd love to hear folks. So 2 to 3 assets. I can kind of kick it off here. I've been thinking a lot lately about food sovereignty and food independence and ways to kind of mitigate the impact of food deserts here. I mean, it's a problem everywhere, right? And is very much a problem here in the Portland metro area. Folks who are limited in their access to healthy, affordable food options. And to that end, I think there are several organizations here in the Portland area. There's that focus on food sovereignty through community gardens, bringing in members of the community who are typically excluded from these efforts to really invite community building around learning how to garden your own vegetables, you know, and distribute these resources to the community. So that's a big asset that I've been thinking about lately, is how do we bolster food independence and kind of circumvent these the impacts of these food deserts in a way that invites community building. Do we have anyone else interested in maybe sharing what came to mind when it comes to assets? And
Christian, I can share one. This is Bob Doppelt. Hi, everybody. I live south of Eugene, Oregon, and there is south of Spencer Butte, as it's called. It's a big hill, and there's the Spencer Butte Neighborhood Association that was formed about 3 years ago. It's a really large area because it's forested, and there's now being formed local neighborhood groups, or basically TRCNs, and we've divided the area up into 10 smaller neighborhoods, and people are sharing their emails back and forth. They're communicating. They're having about a quarterly meeting now among people. It really gives me hope and faith, because we're at high risk of wildfires here. And we got hammered by an ice storm a year ago, and people have to help each other here. So this is really a resilience asset that's now growing, and more of the neighbors are now participating.
that's awesome. Yeah, it reminds me of, I believe it's Lincoln County here in the state of Oregon has a similar program where they'll do a block connectors kind of process where blocks of their town are split up, and then folks will, you know, attend to the needs of their section, which is really cool to see. Awesome. Thanks, Bob. Anyone else? Any assets come to mind? Feel free to come off mute and share, or pop them in chat.
Christian, we have a CSA that started here about 3 years ago, and that has been such a wonderful bringing together of community people. When you talk about food sovereignty, it's really an important part of our community now. And not only do they, you can invest in this as a private person, but they also have, if you don't take your share for the week, they donate that food to the local food pantry and soup kitchen. So it's a wonderful asset that you're making me think about how I can incorporate that into some of the work I'm doing locally too. So thank you for offering this idea.
Yeah, thank you, Reb. I love that idea, and it's neat to see maybe some access barriers being circumvented by that food being donated to other organizations and whatnot. So great to hear. Yeah, and I think speaks to like the breadth of resources and assets that could be considered when it comes to asset mapping. Really an opportunity to think outside the box there. Drew, I saw you come off mute. Not to single you out, but feel free to share if you like.
Yeah, so I've got an asset and a barrier. So there's an organization called Urban Gleaners. It's a popular concept. So this nonprofit goes around to local farms and gathers up their odd looking or unsellable produce. And they bring it to people who cannot otherwise afford healthy food, food deserts, etc. One of the barriers I feel like I studied this a little bit in the metro area, language access. So a lot of mistrust by other cultures. One area I'm very interested in looking into and meeting with folks is the ASL community, American Sign Language. It's my next thing.
Yeah, great resource, love Gleaners. But yes, I think language access is huge, and I thank you for naming that. Yeah, an important consideration as we continue to build our asset map. So thank you very much, Drew. Stephanie, not to single you out, but I saw you come off mute as well.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, an asset that always comes to mind when I think about climate resilience is public libraries and how much they're already functioning sort of as these like third spaces that are can provide like keep people safe from smoke and heat, when people maybe don't have air conditioning or a home even. And then also, they're already these spaces that have these like stacking functions where there's a lot of different community programming that can be offered there. And I always think about the need to support libraries and how can that model be even like expanded. Like there's so many abandoned malls right now, and like what would it look like to be like start investing in more of these kinds of public spaces that are quite open to the community. But I think a barrier is they're just so under-resourced and often are really at the intersection of poverty and climate change as well, and meeting the needs of people who might be experiencing houselessness or addiction. And I know they're just under a lot of stress to manage the needs of all the different patrons who use that space.
Certainly, yes, and personally, big fan of libraries, so thank you for naming that. And yeah, it's incredible what they can provide. And I mean, like you mentioned, so many programming, even just applying for a job on their computers there and whatnot. It's fantastic. So thank you for naming that. Yeah, great resource. Anybody else? Any kind of resources come to mind as we expand our thinking around what an asset might be?
I'll chime in really quick, Christian.
Sure.
And then I'll let Marianne go. But something that just popped in my mind a few days ago, and I'm Christy from Trauma from Oregon, by the way, is I'm part of a couple Buy Nothing groups in our area, and those already are like mini resource networks that are already available. And last night, someone just posted in our Buy Nothing group, "Hey, does anyone want to work on community resilience together?" And I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's happening, and it's not from me." So I was like, hey, and Stephanie, to your point, I was just thinking my library is located in the mall. And I think, like I'm just thinking about how we can combine those opportunities together in that way. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, that's awesome to hear, and I think maybe speaks to the power of like leveraging things like social media to positively impact the community, maybe for a for a change. Excellent. Hi, Jennifer. I see you coming off mute.
Yes, so building on these conversations about, libraries and information sharing, in our own neighborhood, there is a bulletin board where the mailboxes are, and people can post things there for information exchange. And there's a children's blackboard, and sometimes they put up different messages. So, and there's like one of those little free libraries where people can leave a book and take a book. So without it being it's a third space, like Stephanie is speaking about, just within our specific neighborhood. And one of the barriers that I notice is there's a lot of sound in the neighborhood from chainsaws or lawnmowers or water pressure, or, washing equipment, this sort of thing. And some folks have some deep sound sensitivities and other concerns about environmental issues where they can't get outside when there are those sorts of sound things. So even though we take things for granted, about the beauty of walking trails that we can get to, the ocean or local streams and forests, not everybody is able to access those because of the potential triggers of the sounds. So I'm thinking about, what is it that we can do to grow that kind of awareness for one another of each other's needs, and others are sensitive to barking dogs, for heaven's sakes, right? So it's something that's part of our environment that I think would be great to talk about. But where do you even begin conversations like that? That's something that I think would be really helpful to explore here.
Certainly, yes. And I think those considerations are very profoundly in line with the principles of trauma-informed care, considering creating a safe environment, creating that trust and transparency, that feeling of mutuality, really bringing in members of the community who might have those needs, and then incorporating those needs into our TRCN development is super important. So thank you so much for naming that. And Marianne, I see you coming off mute. Sorry if I skipped you there. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no worries. I love the idea of libraries because I have personally been to a number of meetings held in library community, community spaces. And as you can see, I have some gray hair. I've been around for a few years. That's another quasi-public space are senior centers, because that might also serve a population that might be more in need than other populations during adversity. And then we're blessed in the Bay Area. There's lots and lots of open space, and some of them are more accessible than others. So like in North Berkeley, we have this beautiful space all along the bay that has lots of opportunity for gathering spaces and for clean, healthful, mutually supporting activities to happen with our great climate, and again with lots of open space. So making use of that, I think, would be also valuable.
Excellent. Yeah, I love that kind of expansion of assets to include natural areas, and I think we'll see on an example map I have later, I've listed all the natural areas here in Portland, and huge asset, and oftentimes it's free to access these areas, there's transportation involved and whatnot, but there are it can be a great resource. And thank you for naming senior centers as well. I think that's so important, and draws to mind too, how can we include on the other kind of end of the spectrum, maybe how can youth be involved, and how can we create spaces for youth in this in these efforts as well? I think it's very important to do both. So thank you so much for naming that, Marianne. Alrighty, any kind of other assets come to mind, and then we could Cool. Okay. Oh, yes.
Just one more thing, talking about transportation to places. Again, in the Bay Area, we have lots of well-functioning transportation that people may or may not be aware of. And those hubs where the Bay Area Rapid Transit stations are is another place where people could meet and then be, you know, help to increase the awareness of being able to get around. I know that the BART is running into fiscal problems since the pandemic. And, you know, so they're doing trying to do public outreach to let people know. And that could be very important, again, during some kind of an adversity where there might be a problem in one area of the Bay Area, and you could jump on a BART and get away from whatever is dangerous.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, public transportation, I think, is huge. That also brings to mind maybe resources that are available to help folks access medical appointments via transportation and pieces like that. You know, if there's access issues involving, you know, getting to resources in that way. So thank you for naming that. Yes. Oh, I see Katie and Jeff coming off, or Katie coming off mute there.
The ideas that have been proposed are really great ideas. One thing I'm kind of, as they're kind of getting juxtaposed, you know, talking about transportation and the BART system today, you know, what does that look like if you have long-term, you know, 100 years from now, if there's sea rising? The libraries, I'm thinking my library, we just had a tsunami fair, and the library is like right next to the bay. And I love the library, and that would be a great spot. And then I was thinking, oh, what would be the next alternative? The school. Oh wait, the school's in the tsunami zone too. And so I think it was making me think that it's a broader. I love these concrete ideas. I think that's fantastic that it's based in concrete solutions. I think one of the conversations that would be interesting in this group is it's a big lifestyle shift. When I go to areas where they're still building single family homes, I'm just going, what? Like, what decade are we in? And I know that can be controversial, but the reality, what I think maybe the reality is, you know, we may have a resource scarcity where, you know, how are we deploying those resources? Are we continuing to act on an individual basis? Or are we starting to look at the health and welfare and economic ability of everybody? And I think to this group's kind of ideology is the more we cooperate with that and find an equilibrium, the better off we are. And so one of those conversations is really working with, you know, urban planning, you know, people that are making those decisions or allowing certain things. How are they building today? Because, you know, or not building. What are they not building that we need? Like public transportation. You know, I think a really easy solution to climate change is you know, EV's great, but like get rid of all the cars. Let's just have public transportation. It seems very extreme, but maybe that's a potential where we need to go. The conversation. So these assets. I guess my point being, it's not only what exists today, but maybe what we should be looking for as we say, okay, here may be scenario 1, scenario 2, scenario 3. We really don't know, but how do we build those assets for the future to endure?
Certainly, yes. That calls to mind maybe not only opportunities for advocacy by the TRCN to kind of help shape that future in a way that's more sustainable and resilient, but also considering too the longevity of some of these resources and assets. You know, to your point about the tsunami zone, we're in a very earthquake-prone area here in the Portland area, and we also are bridge city. You know, in the event of a large earthquake, are those bridges going to be operable, you know, or even still there, you know, and how is that going to affect our resource access as well? So thank you so much, Katie. I appreciate you bringing that up. And I saw a raised hand from Christina, and then
Yeah, so I have been hesitant to speak because I did a little dig
sorry, Christina,
last
we
night,
lost you.
and it turns out that there's a here where I live. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Sorry, we lost you there
Okay,
for a brief
it
moment.
seems like when my video is on, I get bad service
No
with the
problem.
network. Yeah, so I was reticent to share because I'm feeling privilege because I last night I investigated something where I live, and it looks like there's a very extensive organization that includes classes for the community and is very organized and looks pretty great. I don't really know what to say. There's Map Your Neighborhoods, Hubs Introduction, Psychological First Aid. There's all sorts of classes, and it looks like they're really doing a good job trying to get people involved.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah, to have resources. I mean, it sounds like ample assets to add to the map then in that case, and very exciting. Yeah, that's neat. I feel a similar way here in Portland, where there's lots of great work being done, and it's a matter of kind of finding ways to plug in and maybe even just make those connections in the community. So thank you. Excellent. Alrighty, folks. Well, let's kind of jump into asset mapping here. I'll kind of run through these real quick, and then we can kind of continue to brainstorm and be in community with each other. But so just to this end, we're using some resources that were developed by Switchboard, which is a resource hub for refugee service providers here in the United States, but they offer a lot of great resources for asset mapping. So I'll send out put it in chat. Christy, would you mind maybe putting in the resources I sent via email in the chat there, if you don't mind? It would be much
Are
appreciated.
they just the files, or are there Google links to them?
I believe they're files attached to the email.
I'll do my best.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. Yeah, I can try to pop in too, but I appreciate you. Yeah, so those will be in chat. But before beginning the asset mapping process, I mean, it's important to ask. We're running into this or experiencing this in the Portland TRCN right now. Has an asset map been made previously? And if so, by whom? So in the case of the Portland TRCN, asset mapping has been done previously by an organization that's represented in the TRCN, which provides an awesome jumping off point for continuing to make connections in the community. So in an effort to not either minimize the work that's been done previously and not, redo work that's been done previously, it's an important step to see, okay, has asset mapping been done in my community before? And then how did this attempt work out? Is it something that the community is using? Are they finding it helpful? Are there key takeaways from this previous attempt? And are there other people or resources available to support this asset mapping process? In the case of the Portland TRCN, we have several folks involved and on board in terms of resources, though many of us are volunteering our time to that effort. So that is a limitation in terms of our ability to continue to engage in this work. And so are there people or resources that can assist in the asset mapping process, whether it's funding or time or expertise, making those connections in the community? So just a couple considerations as you're beginning the process. And in terms of planning your asset mapping process, identifying asset mapping partners can be people involved in your TRCN or connecting with people with experience or expertise in your community who are aware of the available assets and resources. Next would be defining the boundaries of our community and region, because this is going to be very important in determining, obviously, which assets we're going to include in the map, what groups and folks we're considering in terms of access issue or challenges, barriers to accessing these resources. I'm reminded of the Portland TRCN in our Portland metro area. We have the city of Portland and then several surrounding communities involved or included in the metro area there. But one of these communities is on the other side of the large Columbia River, so how are we going to ensure that folks who are maybe geographically separated from us by a large body of water included in the considerations for access there? Establishing an overarching vision, and that vision can be in line with your TRCN's vision. For example, we're going to build community resilience, as a general vision there. SMART goals. Now, this is something we've probably encountered before, but specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound, all great considerations for really ensuring that our goals in this effort are sustainable, and possible? And how are we going to measure when they're completed? Then we're determining how resources will be gathered. We'll jump into some templates here in just a moment and ways to do that and record them. But how are we going to gather those resources? Are we going to be interviewing folks? Are we going to be doing community outreach to these organizations that might be partners or assets? Could just be, are we going to be using a web engine to search different assets in our community? How will we be storing these? So are we going to be using a spreadsheet? Are we going to be using a template? Are we going to be loading them directly onto a map that's interactive? Whatever best suits your community. And then how are we going to distribute this asset map to members of the community as well? How are we going to invite others to both participate in the asset mapping process, but receive this information? And then the tools to use to build the map. And we'll get into some different options here, I believe, on the next slide. Yes. Okay. Did it work out, Christy, to maybe pop those in chat? I see them. Excellent. Oh, cool. Okay, there's chat. Thank you so much. So this is the community asset mapping template. Now, this is something I put together that's kind of an amalgamation of different asset mapping resources around that are available, and kind of provides just a general framework for building an asset map. You can see there we have a place to put the organization or resource, whatever the asset might be, a space for contact information or a website. How will we get in touch with this organization or resource? What are the strengths and what does this asset bring to the table in terms of resources? And then finally, notes on opportunities for collaboration or benefits. So I'm considering an example earlier, maybe a community, we'll say urban gleaners. So this organizational resource, we have some contact information for these folks. Now, what can they provide the community, or what are they, interested in doing in terms of strengths? Now, it could be providing food for the community there, and then opportunities for collaboration or benefits. Like, okay, so we're in a crisis situation. How can urban gleaners, how have they agreed to kind of plug in here? Excellent. So feel free to open that document up if you don't mind. You should be able to just click on it and it'll download and open up on your computer there. But that'll just be the Word document that says asset map template. Okay. So yes, a little bit of a practice session. Now we've already started kind of generating some ideas here. But we don't have a very large group today, so we won't split into groups. This can be our group here. But we can kind of jump in and do a little bit of practice in terms of, or actually kind of just start an asset map, really. So considering the resources and partnerships that would benefit, let's go global. TRCN here. We have folks from different countries on the call, and it's great to have everyone here. So we'll kind of expand our thinking out to what might be kind of universal assets and benefits in terms of building resilience here in this group, in this coalition that we are in today. So feel free to take a moment, pull that asset map template out of the chat there. And then, yeah, feel free to start kind of just brainstorming. What are organizations in your experience that might bolster community resilience among our coalition here? And feel free to come off mute. I'd love to hear the thoughts. I mean, I know we've already done some little bit of exploration in this way, but feel free to pop the previously mentioned assets in there, or if you want to maybe share a new one that comes to mind, that'd be great. And then maybe expanding the thinking out a little bit to opportunities for collaboration. What specifically might this asset bring to the table in terms of building community resilience? I'm reminded of the library example. This can be an opportunity to have some shelter from extreme weather, can be opportunities for communication, using the computers, phones, other assets available at the library to contact folks out of the area or within the area. So yeah, just kind of expanding that thinking out to how are these assets going to bolster community resilience? Give us just a minute or two here to kind of get that started, and then feel free to just come off mute or pop it in chat.
Christian, can you clarify the ask for the information gathering? Are we looking at the vision? Because I have it up now. Are we looking at the vision, SMART objective, or just different cultural resources and what they might have?
Yes. Pulling that up now. Okay. So
Oh,
yes, so
perfect.
yeah. We feel free to maybe explore visions that come to mind when you think about forming your TRCN. We don't have to fill this section out now. It can just be something that we begin thinking about. But in terms of the overarching vision, so I just have an example in there. Just develop and bolster transformational resilience throughout my community through building social connections and building gaps in resource access or knowledge. So that can be the overarching vision that kind of drives this asset mapping endeavor here. But really, that can be anything that would best suit your needs. Maybe your community has ample food resources, but maybe some limitations in terms of transportation resources. So maybe the vision can be, okay, let's establish a asset map that lists transportation in the event of daily life, but also if we were having a crisis or disaster, how could we mitigate transportation issues? And I mean, that could look like something like, okay, these people have a truck or a van and they have agreed to be present and kind of check in about using that to help people out in the event of a flood or an evacuation effort or something to that end. Yes, or maybe we have this medical transportation resource here in the area that helps people who are you have transportation limitations in terms of getting to doctor's appointments or other resources in that way. So this can be really tailored to your specific needs. And I'd also love to hear maybe visions that come to mind too when you think asset mapping. And in terms of the SMART goals, in my mind, that's kind of how are we going to do this? You know, we have the vision, connecting it to the SMART goals. So for my little example here, some members of my community have access to a regularly updated list. So we have that time-bound piece. We're regularly updating this. That could be once a month, depending on capacity. Regularly updated list of local resources to aid in addressing the mental health impacts of the climate crisis. So kind of going with that transportation goal there, or that transportation vision, it could be, members of my community have transportation in place in the event of this crisis that my region is susceptible to, or members of my community are have adequate transportation to medical appointments and in the event of an evacuation, things like that.
I'd like to ask a question, Christian.
Yeah.
I'm looking at these resources, I'm starting to feel a bit overwhelmed actually by the kind of workload of all of this, as just, a person in the community looking to get started. I'm wondering if you could share some stories of how people have resourced the process of even going around through this, Is this something that, there's money for hiring someone to lead a process like this? Are there community members that just say, hey, let's have a potluck and start to have a conversation? Like, what's the simplest, easiest way that creates an entry point for folks to start to do this work?
Excellent. Yes, thank you for that. I mean, super important question. I think speaks to the, like the personnel, the resources to help aid this process. So, and Bob, Christy, and Jesse, feel free to jump in as well if you have any kind of stories from your experience. But I think a great way, I mean, like you mentioned, Jennifer, like a great way to start that is bringing members of the community in, because one of our primary I guess entry points into community resilience would be building social connections across the community here. And, the asset map, I think, comes after those social connections are made often, so you have people coming together, it could be your neighbors, it could be other folks who are interested in building community resilience in your area, and those relationships form. And then through those kind of established relationships, then, the asset map, things like this, efforts that directly pursue community resilience can be developed from those existing social networks. And it could be everyone in your community just adds one thing to the asset map, you know, or not your community, but everyone in your group adds one thing to the asset map, you know, and through that collaboration, this resource starts to take form. So I think that's, I mean, like you said, I think having a potluck or a community, in the past, I've heard of folks having block parties where, you know, members of their neighborhood will come in and just have a social talk that is focused on, okay, how can we discuss potential challenges, the experiences we're currently facing in light of the climate crisis and everything going on around us. And out of those social connections, this process maybe doesn't feel as much of a heavy lift because it's not entirely on one person to do it. But would love to open up, maybe Bob, I saw you come off mute.
Yeah, Christian, I think you gave a great summary, but so just give me an example. Now it's been, I guess, almost 10 years that up in the rural community of the Dalles, Oregon, we were working. They had brought together, they first had a little conference on trauma issues. The community was traumatized, especially the children, lots of violence, lots of issues going on. We came in and just started to ask people out for lunch. We had first time, I think we had 6 or 7 people had lunch and just got to know each other a little bit. And we just started talking about what resources exist here in the Dalles to help people begin to build resilience and avoid this kind of issues we're seeing, especially in youth. And then we just had a conversation about it. I wrote them down afterwards and sent them out to everybody. And then we had another lunch about 2 weeks later. And I said, I brought up this thing. I had written them down on a big piece of paper. So I showed everybody. Anybody else have any suggestions for assets that might be helpful? And it just began a community conversation in that way. So there was no paid staff. It was just very informal, and it ended up being a very powerful program. It went throughout the community. Other people started to do it. And it can happen the other way, you know, paid staff can go do it and try to organize those things. And you don't have to show people these sophisticated templates that you're looking at on the web. It might intimidate them. Just start by asking the question, you know, and writing things down. Or if it's a more sophisticated group, you can use this kind of thing. So I just hope that helps. There's lots of ways. It really depends on what your community's like, what your relationships are, connections are like, and what the resources are that exist.
Thank you, Bob. Appreciate that. Yeah. Christy, sorry, I saw you. Oh, yeah, please. Yes.
Go ahead, Katie.
Or me, Drew.
Feel free to go, Drew. I saw you come off mute, and then Katie will. Yes.
Okay. So a lot of, I guess, organizations and coalitions that are already working on mental health in frontline communities or vulnerable folks, community resilience, they have staff time dedicated to things like these. Social media, you could just search, you know, your city hashtag community resilience or something. I looked at Latino Health Network and immediately got a response back. They're very interested in this topic and coordinating with resilience projects and things like that. So.
Thank you, Drew. Yeah, it's incredible to see, you know, a lot of organizations being like ready to jump in here, and yeah, thank you for sharing. Katie, feel free to go ahead. Oh, sorry, we have you on mute there.
This is a really great segue from Drew's comment, so thank you, Drew. Any experience or suggestions on, you know, just use the term, too many cooks in the kitchen, where people are overlapping, or when you do have this event, I haven't been through one personally, but where maybe too many groups are coming in and saying, okay, you do this, and then there's a lot of finger pointing, or things getting dropped off because there's, you know, thought, oh, somebody else was doing that, or just, you know, there's so much overlap, it can lead to a lot of confusion, and then also just a lot of wasted time and expense. So I think I would like, as a community member, just like, okay, I know everybody in the city is going to go do this when XYZ happens. And everybody's on the same page and everybody's agreed to it, or at least has buy-in to it. And everybody's been included. And different groups may execute the different functions, but everybody has their role and their job, including the citizens. I think that's really important that people feel they have a purpose in it. Any suggestions to get to that kind of whole community holistic approach when you do have so many nonprofits that are making a living off of it, the city obviously, again, you have a lot of cooks in the fire that have they're not just volunteers, so they have other motives as well.
Gotcha. Yes. I think that's a great question. And I think that is a great segue. Maybe I know we're running out of time here, but I think it's a great segue into the second part of the asset mapping template. And I'll just pop over there real quick. And this is an opportunity here to maybe explore those overlaps or those gaps, conversely, in the resources here. So you can see there we have a spot on the list as we go down in the asset mapping template to record, okay, are there overlaps going on here? Are there recommended actions to that end? And then I think maybe most importantly to this point is, who is the point person on this? Okay, who is going to be the person who has volunteered their time to either address this overlap in resources and maybe do some coordination around that, or address the gap in these resources and again do some hunting down some resources or do some coordination in that way. So I think having a specific person, not assigned, but volunteered and stepping into that role for coordinating these, oftentimes, yes, like you said, many community organizations who are doing this professionally and maybe do overlap in terms of the services or resources that they provide, can be very helpful. And Bob, I saw you come on video. Did you have something maybe to add? Oh, we have you on mute there, Bob.
Just want to respond to the last comment that's really the value of a transformation resilience coordinating network. To bring all these together, you often start small. You might only have a third or a quarter of the groups and organizations that are key in the community that agree to form this network. But then as people watch it and see the progress, more will join. So that's the value of organizing these networks. To try to avoid that overlap, and also identify conflicts or gaps in who's being served and get that kind of coordination going.
Thank you, Bob. I do see that we are out of time, unfortunately. I know this is a lot to cover. It was so great to hear kind of everyone's thinking start to, the wheels turning in terms of what can be an asset in the community and how to kind of catalog these resources and then distribute them to members of our community or coalitions. Let's see, building an asset map. So if you folks don't mind or are interested, feel free to take a moment, download the other couple of resources out of the chat there. I've also included my email address. So if you like to continue to brainstorm and thought partner about asset mapping in your community, I'd love to hear from you. And we'll continue to do these skill sessions over the next couple weeks. So conversation will definitely be continuing. Here's just a quick example of an asset map, like I mentioned earlier, of natural spaces here in Portland that I did for another project. But you can kind of see the possibilities of creating an interactive map to this end. One of the resources that's the PDF that's in the chat has a whole guide on how to set this up in Google Maps. And I'm looking into resources that aren't Google for accomplishing this, but in the meantime, this is kind of an option for folks. And yeah, so to that end, I'd like to thank everyone so much for your participation today. It's great to see everybody and kind of sit in community. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And feel free to reach out. I always love hearing from folks and continuing the conversation online. So
Thanks, Christian, Christy, Bob. Nice meeting everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Good work.
Yeah.
thank you.